Hello everyone and welcome back to another book review. Today we are going to be reviewing the first book that I read in 2025. I already have 3 books down, and that is going to be Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth Revis. I am going to first give a brief outline of the plot, what's happening in this book, and then, as you might be able to tell by all my stickies, I have a lot of thoughts on this book. So stick around for my thoughts, which will be after I review the plot. But first of all, you are going to have to excuse me drinking water throughout this book review. I have a horrible sore throat, but the books are due back at the library like today, and the library does not take into consideration my small and not profitable YouTube channel book reviews. So I have to return these, which means I have to film today with a sore throat. If I keep drinking water, I can make it through it. So let's talk about Beth Revis's Full Speed to a Crash Landing. I had not read anything by her before, so I went in blind. I saw it at the library in the news section marked as science fiction. I love science fiction. I really like big spaceships in space. Bonus points if there's aliens, bonus points if the ships in space are shooting at each other. So those are all things I love. So I had high hopes going into this. The plot of this book revolves, or is mainly told from the point of view of a character by the name of Ada Lamar. Ada is, when we meet her, running out of oxygen on her compromised ship. So she is hoping to get someone's attention. She has been at this crash site. So there is another ship that has broken apart, that has crashed, and Ada works as a salvager. She's going in, she's gonna pull material that she can get from this ship, and she's going to get out. The ship is kind of at an undisclosed location, so maybe no one else should be around, but there is another ship, the Halifax, which is there, and she is calling for their aid or their assistance because she's running out of oxygen due to her compromised ship. The Halifax eventually responds, they go and they rescue her, and she gets brought upon the ship. That is legally how they're supposed to react. If they see someone else in distress, they need to rescue her, so they're doing their legal minimum. But Ada has some questions because this was kind of an undisclosed wreck, which does lead to the question from the reader on how Ada knows about it. But why is this other group here, which is clearly associated with the government and also seems to be looking? Well, Ada is supposedly there to get some salvage for money, and these people seem to be looking at something that crashed on the ship. So they want to find something, and Ada is attempting to get to know what they're trying to find by talking to the crewmates, and maybe she can make herself useful here, maybe she can make some money, and there's also a little bit of sexual tension between her and another member of the crew. So they're still at this wreck, they're still poking around, and Ada's trying to figure out what this crew's actually after and maybe what is missing from the wreck that she missed, although we also get the sense that maybe Ada knows more than she's letting on, and maybe her purpose for being here is being a little bit obscure. So that's the basic plot, and that's where I'm going to leave it. We're now going to go into my thoughts, and these are sticky notes of shame, because the first 2025 book that I read was unfortunately a flop. I want to start with a disclaimer, though, before I go any further. Actually, we're going to start with some water. Sorry. Disclaimer. This is my personal opinion and my personal review of the book. I feel like this should go without saying, but I don't want anyone to be offended if you love Beth Revis's work, if you liked this book. This is just me personally knowing what I like in sci-fi and how I read this book. I personally did not particularly care for this book, and I felt it was a massive letdown for me. If you like it, I would actually love to hear what you liked about this book, because I love hearing a contrasting opinion. It helps bring out parts of the book that I personally didn't maybe realize, recognize, or connect with. So don't feel like I'm attacking you or your reading taste or style. This book just didn't work for me, and we're going to go into why. The first was, I picked up this book because it was sci-fi, because I wanted it to be sci-fi, but it felt like it was a sci-fi setting for romance to occur within. The romance wasn't a B-plot, it wasn't a subplot, and I'm completely okay with romance and sci-fi existing in the same book. In fact, romance and sci-fi, romance and fantasy are 2 things that I don't mind. I don't like it when the romance starts to take over the sci-fi element. And when we get to some of these example sticky notes, I think that sometimes the sci-fi was just a vehicle to tell the romance story. My suspicions were confirmed when I decided partway through the book to look at the author's profile in the back to find that she writes romantasy, a genre that I personally take a very dim view to. I do not like romantasy overall. I feel like in a lot of romantasy, the romance takes over the fantasy elements, and I wouldn't mind if those 2 elements, and I don't mind when those 2 elements exist in a book. But when the romance becomes so strong, it overtakes the sci-fi element, when I feel like there's a good sci-fi story here that could be told, but it wasn't told because we were so wrapped up in the romance, which wasn't even well written, I'm annoyed. So I felt like this spine on the side of the book should have said romance, because that was primarily what it was. And you can see right away. I mean, Ada gets rescued from her little situation, and the first thing she's thinking about is how hot the men on the ship are. Which you think, if you're in a compromised situation, which the extent of the compromise of her situation is called into question later. However, she very immediately is like, I'm thirsting after these men. And she continues, one man in particular called Ryan, and of course Ryan's in charge of the operation, because why would the main female character be thirsting after the janitor, even if he was the most attractive one there? No, it's the man in charge. Even though he's not the captain, he is the man in charge. So she spends most of the book in this romance subplot, which I did not care about whatsoever. So I felt like I was sold a sci-fi book, and I didn't get a sci-fi book, and I was unhappy about that. The romance plot, though, felt really fake, and you could make an argument that maybe some of that was Ada playing things up to figure out more stuff from the crew, but I felt like the author wanted us to feel like there was at least some genuine sexual chemistry between these characters, and I didn't feel it at all. I didn't like the two characters together, and I felt like it felt very rushed. The book is quite a bit thinner than maybe a normal sci-fi book, so maybe the author felt like she was having to work on an accelerated timeline, but I did not like it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the speed, the way that they fell for each other. I didn't like it at all, and it felt very, very fake. The female main character comes across as a strong, independent female main character, and I mean that derogatively. Nothing against strong female independent main characters, but there is a type, and you probably know what I'm talking about. A woman who's actually operating in a story in a way that is mature and like an adult doesn't need to continue to reassert that, and doesn't come off as these fake, strong, independent female main characters. And this makes me sound a little misogynistic, and I want to be very clear that this is not what I'm going towards at all. Women can absolutely operate in their own power. I love reading stories, especially sci-fi stories, with women who are capable of taking charge of a situation, thinking logically through a situation, and we'll get to maybe a different retelling of the story I would have preferred. So it has absolutely nothing to do with her being a woman. The idea is there's this stereotype that I sometimes see in fantasy and sci-fi where the strong female independent main character is just stubborn. She somehow independently is able to discover everything. She's able to do everything. She's able to accomplish everything on her own. She doesn't need a man, and not in a sense that like she can do things by herself, but she's better than everyone else. She's pretty. She's smarter than everyone else. She figures everything out before everyone else. She doesn't feel like a real human. She feels like this caricature and that she can do no wrong. That's what Ada felt like, and it feels very childish. Her narration felt very childish, even though she's supposed to be this mature adult. Nothing about her felt relatable. It didn't feel, and I feel like she could have been written as, like, there's no reason why she couldn't be a woman salvaging and then getting sucked up. It was her narration and the way that she portrayed herself, and of course she figures everything out, and of course she can save the day, and of course she figures this, that, and everything else out. Of course she does, because that's who she's supposed to be in the story. That was, again, my take on that. And that really annoys me because I feel like it almost does a disservice to all the people who are writing strong characters, be they men or women in the genre. And I feel, again, the need to put a caveat in here. I'm reading a lot of older sci-fi and fantasy, and the lack of women in those stories is very, very evident, considering we make up 50% of the population. So there's definitely... This is not to say don't put women in lead roles in sci-fi, but when you do, don't do it in a caricatured way because it comes off as really, really immature. I feel like this is something I would expect out of fantasy or sci-fi written in the early 2010s, not something written in the 2020s. So let's get up with the times. Now we're going to go into some of these sticky notes. These are just things that stood out. I started calling them sticky notes of shame because they were so bad. So we're just going to go through the quotes that I'm going to read from here and explain why I have a problem with them. The first one. For the first time ever, Ursula looks at me, Ursula's the captain, as if she's impressed. Last world to be colonized, although it had a few centuries to grow. I've only been there a handful of times. It's a pain in the ass to get there, which may be why it has a growing movement of people who want to withdraw from the world from the United Galactic System. I don't care enough to keep up with the politics of it all, but Gliese Earth basically claims that too much of its money goes to the other worlds, and they don't get enough benefits from the Union. This was a really ridiculous quote because, first of all, if there's a planet that's seeking to leave a global political union, you think most people would have a base level understanding. And to claim in this quote that she doesn't care enough about the politics, she doesn't keep up with the politics, is also contradictory on things that occur later in the story where she clearly does keep up with the politics. So she knows about these different places that have been colonized. It is sci-fi, but she doesn't keep up with who wants to leave this galactic union, but she does know that it's occurring, but she doesn't keep up with the politics of it all, which I feel like most mature women who are operating in space, doing life things, would keep up with the base politics that are going to affect her. I was just annoyed. This is page 64, and we were already on thin ice. I glance at Ryan, the only other person in the room. He smiles without answering the implied question. I'm going to guess he's from a regal Earth. He seems like the kind of guy who comes from regal Earth, a world full of pretentious assholes. Okay, let's start here. We're on page 65 now. So Ryan is the person that when she first gets rescued, she finds very attractive. So she's kind of latched onto him at this point. That's fine. You can find people attractive on first glance. People do it every single day. You've probably seen someone attractive in the supermarket before, but at this point, he hasn't really done or said anything that would make him a pretentious asshole. She's trying to guess where people are from when she's meeting people. And she's guessing Ryan is from regal Earth, and they're full of pretentious assholes. At this point in the story, he hasn't done anything to make him a pretentious asshole, nor does any of his characteristics later in the book make him a pretentious asshole. That characteristic just came out of nowhere and was never revisited. Well, it may have been revisited once, but there was no backing. She just says this. Okay, sticky note number 3. This is one of those examples where I'm talking about where the sci-fi element was, we started to get into the interesting sci-fi bit. So at this point, they're trying to locate a thermal box that may have survived the crash. Ada, because at this point she's ingratiated herself, is that how you say that word? She's integrated herself into the crew very easily and quickly, which shouldn't make sense for a civilian to integrate themselves into a government, whatever. It happened because it had to happen because she's better than everyone else because she's the strong, independent female main character, of course. So this is an example of where the sci-fi starts to get interesting, but we immediately get derailed with some meaningless romance. This thermal and impact protected case is fine for now, resting on the ledge a few meters above the lava flow. But one violent shrug of the protoplanet's shoulders and that box is going on a river ride made of fire, and not even its thermal protection will help. I lean back, looking at the holographic projection. You're gonna hire me, I say confidently. I turn to him. We should call the captain, negotiate terms. So, she immediately switches gears to, I'm in charge, because I'm the important female main character. The captain doesn't make the decision. Ryan says this. How hot is he when he says that? Just all casual, like it's a big deal. And then she goes on talking about how hot he is. So immediately we were discussing maybe some problems with getting this case and what could happen, and they're looking at this holographic projection. So we're starting to get back to interesting sci-fi stuff. Wrong. We need to remind ourselves that Ryan is actually very attractive. Ryan would be more attractive if he just talked about the sci-fi stuff and tried to figure out how to get this thermal box. But no, that's Ada's job. Ada's going to figure out how to save it. I didn't even know that Ada was going to figure out how to save it, but you can figure out based on the kind of book this is. All right, sticky number 4, sticky of shame. Once we're landed, Ryan tosses off his harness and stands. I'll stay with the ship, he says so quickly that at first I wonder if he's afraid of the planet, not flight. But the others seem to take this in stride. They must have discussed everything before, without me. Of course! You're a civilian. You're not part of this government crew that has been sent to recover something from this wreck. How you even got on this crew? There is some explanation that she has some access to tech and knows how to use some tech that could be helpful, so she could be brought on board. But it should absolutely not be a surprise, nor should you be at any point irritated that they may have discussed something without you. Or maybe if there is some irritation, I feel like a rational adult would be like, I'm a little irritated, but I understand that as a government entity that's also here, they've probably discussed their plans on going down to this planet without me. But anyways, that's just me. What do I know? All right, sticky of shame number, is this 5? This just sounded wrong. I scanned the rift with my helmet's sensors. 81.10 meters. 81.10? Listen, I'm American as American can be. That doesn't, 81.10 meters, is that how you would say it? I'm guessing she wants 81.1, which is how you would say it, but that doesn't even sound, basically this sounds like the author was like, well, we gotta use meters because it's sci-fi, but hasn't touched the metric system since the one little unit we did in 3rd grade where we learned about it. But even I know that's wrong. That doesn't sound right. Now maybe I could be incorrect here, but that just read very awkwardly. There's another point where she uses meters and I just felt like she had no clue what meters were. Okay, sticky number 6, sticky of shame number 6. She's trying to climb up a ledge, and Ryan is walking her through it. So she's asking him to distract her while she does it. How's the weather down there? This is Ryan. Ha, I swing out, my foot sliding until it catches the ledge I spotted. Come on, you can do better than that. Is this distraction a really good idea right now, Ada? Okay, I'll be honest. The warmth when he says my name, that is what's actually distracting. Probably because he has no idea. This dude knows unless he's dense. She also like actively called him sexy multiple times, and I feel like if a woman is actively calling you sexy, you might think that she might be a little attracted to you, maybe just a little bit. That's a pro tip for the guys out there in the dating game. Like, also I don't think I would ever call some, never mind. Anyways, this woman's very bold. Bold of you to assume you have anything witty enough to say to actually distract me, I mumble, looking for the next handhold, because she's cooler than the male interest that's in love with her. Of course she is. Okay. The last sticky of shame. Because every ship is a home. People like Captain Ursula, who treat the Halifax like a tool, don't always know that. At no point have we learned anything about Ursula other than she is a competent woman who's with the crew and therefore our enemy. And that was just an unsupported statement. At no point was she abusing the Halifax. She was just, as someone who, as the captain of the ship who would, in my sci-fi world brain universe, would understand that this ship is the vessel between life and death in space, she probably treats the Halifax quite well and is quite in tune. That's how every sci-fi captain basically has been written. Treating your ship like a respected tool, yes, but with respect and love, because that is the thing that's keeping you from dying in outer space. But Ursula, who we've seen like twice in this whole book, who's mean because she doesn't trust a civilian who just gets brought on board. Yeah, that's a unfounded statement. I think this book would have been better if Ada... First of all, I don't understand why when this government picked up Ada, they didn't just lock her in the room. They were like, okay, we've rendered aid, which is the legal minimum we need to do. We're going to lock you in the room when we sort things out. I don't know why they didn't do that, but they didn't. So instead we have this whole thing where Ada, of course, comes and saves the day, but maybe she has her own little agenda. I think the book would have been better if it had been told from Ryan's perspective. Mostly because Ada truly didn't have anything to add to this at all, unfortunately. Ryan, which, again, just to put any sort of, I guess, commentary to rest, it's not because, like, Ryan could have been a woman too, but if Ryan was just the competent government leader and he was trying to investigate something suspicious that happened during this wreck, that in and of itself is an interesting thing. And then from Ryan's perspective, he could show up to this wreck that no one's supposed to know about, and there's a woman there who's salvaging. Why is Ada there? What does she know that they don't know? So now he has to worry about whether or not there's a leak in the government agency that he works for, because he knows there's some proprietary tech on board the ship, and is she there on accident? Maybe she seems to know more. That could have been a better story. And hell, we can throw in some sexual tension. I don't care. That's not... It was the way this book was written, and in my opinion, the poor quality of writing, which made it so bad. Okay, I went a little overboard, and I was a little bit more negative than I normally am. I was disappointed because this was the first read of the year, and in my opinion, it was so bad. So that's my review of Full Speed to a Crash Landing by Beth Revis. If you have read this book or have any thoughts and opinions, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.